When we wake up, one of the first thoughts that pop into our head is, what am I going to wear? Now, I'm not saying that it's a difficult decision for everyone, but for many, it has become a determinant of how we feel throughout the day. When we put on something fashionable or trendy, we'll feel a lot more superior than if we were to walk out in just anything. Fashion is a way to self-express and helps us feel like a better version of ourselves. But did you know that the fashion industry produces over 100 billion of garments every year, with approximately 85% of them ending up in a landfill? This absurd number is responsible for 10% of global gas emissions, which is higher than emissions from air travel. Our society has normalized overconsumption and encourages us to continue to buy more clothing, meanwhile blatantly ignores the impact it could have on our future. The purpose of this TED Talk isn't to criticize people for buying from fast fashion stores, but rather to encourage critical thinking and conscious consumption. So, what exactly is fast fashion? Fast fashion is a term describing the rapid production of low-quality, inexpensive clothing for masses. The process of a product being created to being sold is called the supply chain. The time it takes for a product to go through the whole chain is referred to as lead time. Some companies make their lead times public. For example, we know that Zara can design, produce, and sell a product in just 2 weeks, while H&M can do the same in 8 weeks. By endlessly offering new trends at cheap prices, fast fashion brands such as Shein, Zara, H&M, or some more recent ones like Temu, influence us to continue to buy more and more clothing. So the question is, how did we get here? In the past, fashion used to be a long-lasting, difficult process that required sourcing materials such as cotton, wool, or leather, and later on, these materials were sewn into needed garments. The beginnings of fast fashion itself emerged with the invention of the sewing machine in 1830. Thanks to this invention, clothes became easier, quicker, and cheaper to make. Due to the bigger accessibility, fashion became more significant, and the dressmaking businesses started catering more to the middle classes. These dress shops continued to grow and grow, and they evolved into what we know as sweatshops. They are still a large foundation of the industry, and they are very effective and cheap to maintain. Unfortunately, it's because the workers are highly underpaid and often work in terrible conditions, putting them in danger. But how did the demand for new clothing go beyond any reason and became one of the most dangerous things that could happen to our ecosystem? Up until the 1960s, dressmaking businesses would usually come up with 4 collections a year, one for each season. This changed when self-expression became more common and trends grew more popular. Young people sought inexpensive clothing to keep up with such trends, and to which the companies were happy to oblige. It was also during the 1950s and 60s when synthetic fibers made their first appearance. Because they were cheaper to produce, companies started to heavily overuse them. Still, that didn't change the fact that clothes were generally well made and could last a very long time. And increasingly, over the past few decades, companies began pushing out more and more collections each year. To keep up with the fast-paced trends and their demands, companies like Zara, as mentioned earlier, set absurd production schedules to just 2 weeks. Soon, the term fast fashion was first used by a New York Times Magazine writer to describe these actions. We know from all kinds of sources that fast fashion is harmful. But why is that exactly? I have arranged the main issues into 3 categories: environment, exploitation, and manipulation. The first one you've probably heard of, as it recently became one of the heaviest discussed topics. But how large of a contributor to the environmental waste is clothing? Well, as mentioned earlier, it is responsible for 10% of global gas emissions, which calculates into 1.2 billion tons of carbon emissions. It is also responsible for 20% of global wastewater. These emissions do not come only from the amount of waste sent to the landfills, but come also from the manufacturing processes, the material production, mainly synthetic fibers, and just production processes. While 1 garbage truck of clothing is sent to a landfill or burned every second, only 1% of these clothes are actually being recycled. Another important factor of the fashion industry is the engine behind the whole industry, which is, of course, the workforce. Fast fashion companies seek out countries where the work regulations are overlooked and are easier to utilize. Among these countries, there is Bangladesh, India, and China, among many others, mainly placed in East Asia. In Bangladesh, workers are paid about 33 cents per year, while in sweatshops in India, the average wage is barely 58 cents. Not only that, they are required to put in 14 to 16 hours of work a day, often having to endure physical and verbal violence from their managers. They work in poor, unhygienic, and unsafe conditions that often put their lives in danger. For example, in 2013, 1,000 garment workers died due to the collapse of the Rana Plaza factory in Bangladesh. Moving to the third category, if we really want to understand the manipulation behind the industry, it is important to keep in mind that the consumers, specific to fast fashion, want the items immediately. As a result, fast fashion companies place a lot of pressure on the duration of production, which results in a cheap product. That piece of clothing can be measured in the amount of wears before it starts to fall apart. Furthermore, this makes the product feeling disposable, especially with the rapidly changing trends and styles. Retailers are able to tempt shoppers with new items while try to convince them that the ones they already have are no longer fashionable. Well, what if we stopped producing clothes? Maybe not forever and not entirely, but slowed down on the overproduction and focused on what we have and on making it work. Thrift shops would probably gain a lot more popularity as they would be one of the only sources of active rotation of clothes. Reselling apps would thrive with people searching for a new purchase. And maybe the environment wouldn't improve immediately, but it would definitely be a huge relief. People would learn to love the clothes they already have, which would break the never-ending cycle of new trends. Well, unfortunately, the garment industry is crucial, especially for the Asian economy. It employs an enormous number of workers, whether working in a factory of thousands or in their own living rooms. They are the foundation of the supply chain. Approximately 1 in 6 people work in some part of the fashion industry, making it the most labor-dependent industry in the world. So, although we can't really stop producing clothes, there are ways to help minimize it without having to stop buying new items. For example, when buying from a store, stationery or not, it is recommended to check if the company has any controversies surrounding their production ethics. There are countless articles exposing simply repulsive actions going on behind the scenes of many well-known brands. Remember that sometimes no information doesn't come from the brand's policy, but serves as a cover-up for their actual behavior. Instead, try to buy from companies that openly describe their production ethics and morals, and you'll find out that they are the ones with better material quality as well. And if what attracts you to going to fast fashion stores are the cheap prices, try buying secondhand. It recently became more popular, and it's seriously a great way to buy a lot of clothing for cheap prices and without the usual negative impact. And when you want to buy new clothes, I would also recommend buying the ones made of natural materials, such as cotton. Synthetic fibers, such as polyester, are way worse for the environment. These small changes are a great way to help regain control over the overwhelming consumption and to save our planet. Remember, there is no technical solution to the fast fashion problem, but the only solution is within the consumers themselves. Thank you for your time.